was a cold autumn night when Claire was driving down an empty stretch of highway on her way back from visiting a friend in a neighboring town. The road was flanked by dense forest on either side, the kind of darkness that made it seem as though the trees could swallow the world whole. She had been driving for nearly an hour without seeing another car, which made the sudden appearance of a lone figure on the roadside all the more unsettling. The man, standing just at the edge of the shoulder, wore a tattered coat, his face partially obscured by the shadows of the dim streetlight flickering overhead. As she approached, he slowly raised his arm, his thumb pointing toward the sky in the universal gesture of a hitchhiker in need of a ride. Claire hesitated. She had always been warned never to pick up hitchhikers, but something about the man seemed non-threatening. He looked exhausted, his shoulders slumped, and his posture one of pure defeat. Against her better judgment, she pulled over. Reaching over to unlock the passenger side door, the man slid in silently, his breath visible in the cold air. He didn't speak much at first, just murmured a quiet, "Thank you," before staring straight ahead as she pulled back onto the road. Claire tried to make small talk, but the man's responses were brief and vague. He didn't offer his name, nor did he ask hers. As they drove deeper into the night, Claire began to feel an inexplicable sense of unease. The silence between them stretched, thick with something unspoken. Then, as she glanced into the rearview mirror, she noticed something that made her grip the steering wheel tighter. There was a movement in the back seat, but that didn't make sense. She was sure the man had gotten in without a bag, without anything other than the clothes on his back. And yet, in the dim light, she could swear she saw another shadow shifting just behind him. Something hunched low, barely visible. Her breath caught in her throat. Gathering her courage, she cleared her throat and casually adjusted her mirror, trying to get a better look. The man beside her suddenly turned, his gaze meeting hers in the mirror. His eyes were cold, devoid of any warmth. He smiled just barely and said, "I wouldn't look back there if I were you." A chill ran down Claire's spine, her fingers tightening instinctively around the steering wheel as the man's quiet words echoed in the small space of the car. She forced herself to keep her gaze fixed on the road ahead, her pulse hammering against her ribs, every fiber of her being screaming at her to pull over and flee. But she didn't. She couldn't. The rest of the drive passed in unbearable silence, the air thick with an unshakable weight. Eventually, the man instructed her to stop near a desolate stretch of road, where no houses or signs of civilization were in sight. Without another word, he stepped out, closing the door with an eerie sense of finality. Claire didn't wait to watch him disappear into the darkness. She simply pressed her foot against the gas pedal and drove, her hands trembling violently. When she finally reached her destination, she sat in her car for a long time, unable to move, unable to breathe properly. Even as the hours passed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something still lingered in the back seat, watching her with unseen eyes. That night, and for many nights after, she slept with the lights on, waking in a cold sweat from dreams she could never fully remember, yet always left her gasping for air. She never spoke about the encounter to anyone. What could she say? That a hitchhiker left something behind, something unseen, something that still clung to the edges of her vision when she glanced too quickly into mirrors or darkened corners. Even years later, whenever she found herself driving alone at night, her eyes would flick to the rearview mirror, just for a second, just to make sure she was truly alone. But no matter how many times she looked, she could never shake the nagging certainty that, one day, she might see something looking back. It was supposed to be a simple trip, one last cross-country adventure, before settling into adulthood. A chance to embrace the freedom of the open road. Olivia had always been cautious, but when she saw the lone hitchhiker standing by the desolate Nevada highway, backpack slung over one shoulder, looking utterly exhausted under the burning sun, she hesitated only a moment before pulling over. He was young, polite, seemingly grateful for the ride, and the conversation started easily enough small talk about music, travel, and the places they had both seen. But as the hours passed, Olivia couldn't shake the growing sense that something was off. The way he would pause too long before answering a question, the way he never really seemed to blink, the occasional glances toward her phone when she received a message. Then, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, he casually mentioned something that made Olivia's blood run cold, a detail about her that he shouldn't have known, something she had never told him, something that suggested he had been watching her long before this ride. Panic set in, but she forced herself to remain calm, smiling through her terror as she quietly adjusted the GPS on her phone to alert someone of her location. But just as she was about to reach her destination, a well-lit gas station where she planned to escape, he leaned in, voice barely above a whisper, and said, "You really shouldn't have picked me up. Not after what happened last time." Olivia never knew if he meant her specifically, or if he had done this before. But as she slammed on the brakes and leapt out of the car, the last thing she saw before running for help was his eerie, knowing smile in the rearview mirror. The police never found him, and to this day, she avoids long drives, unable to shake the feeling that he's still out there, waiting. Sarah had been driving all night, exhausted and eager to reach her motel before fatigue overtook her completely. The stretch of road ahead was barren, save for the lone figure standing beneath the dim glow of a flickering street lamp. Against her better judgment, she slowed down, rolling down the window just enough to ask where he was headed. "Anywhere," he muttered, voice raspy, eyes shadowed beneath his hood. She hesitated, then unlocked the door. The moment he climbed in, the air felt heavier, as if the temperature had dropped. He spoke only in short phrases, responding to her attempts at conversation with vague, unsettling answers. "Been out here a long time, waiting for the right one. You don't recognize me, do you?" That last sentence made her grip the wheel tighter, confusion flickering in her tired mind. Then he turned to face her fully, and in the dim light of the dashboard, she saw something familiar in his features, something eerily close to her own. He smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "I tried to warn you," he whispered. At that moment, something twisted in Sarah's gut, a sudden awareness that she had crossed a line between life and death, between what was and what could have been. For a brief second, she saw not just him, but herself, in him, a version of her own reflection she wasn't prepared to face. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, and she felt as if her entire existence was hanging in the balance, teetering between two realities. The next thing Sarah knew, she was waking up in her parked car, the passenger seat empty, her phone buzzing with a single notification, a missed call from an unknown number. The timestamp? The exact moment she had stopped to pick up the hitchhiker. The call was never traced, and Sarah still doesn't know who or what she let into her car that night. When she looked at the missed call, a deep, inexplicable certainty washed over her. The call had come from somewhere beyond the living, a place where time no longer mattered. And though she couldn't explain why, she knew that the next time she saw him, it would be too late. She never drives alone anymore, and she never, ever stops for strangers. Marcus had never been one to believe in urban legends, especially the kind that warned against picking up strangers on empty roads. But that night, as he drove down the winding stretch of highway leading into a small town, he spotted a woman standing by the roadside, arms wrapped tightly around herself, shivering in the cold rain. Something about her seemed off. Her hair was too neatly in place, despite the downpour, her dress unstained despite the mud. And yet, when he pulled over, she climbed in without a word, eyes fixed straight ahead. The moment she shut the door, a strange chill spread through the car. The air turned heavy, thick, with something Marcus couldn't quite name. He adjusted the heating, but it didn't seem to help. The drive was silent at first, filled only with the rhythmic slap of windshield wipers, until she finally spoke. The words barely reached him through the rain, but he heard them clearly. "You're the first to stop." The sentence sent an unexpected shiver down Marcus's spine, but he forced out a chuckle, trying to mask his unease. He asked her where she was headed, but her only response was a simple address, one Marcus recognized. A house that had burned down years ago, leaving only the remnants of a charred foundation. The chill in his stomach deepened, and he glanced at her. Now, she was staring at him, her lips curling into a faint, almost sad smile. "You should have kept driving." Before he could react, the car swerved violently. The wheel jerked in his hands, as if something had wrenched it away from him. His vision blurred as the headlights sliced through the relentless rain. He slammed on the brakes, heart pounding, as he fought to regain control. When Marcus finally came to, the passenger seat was empty. The door was ajar, and rainwater pooled on the fabric. He sat there, chest rising and falling in ragged breaths, his pulse drumming in his ears. He forced himself to look around, scanning the roadside, but she was gone. The only sound was the steady drip of rain from the car. Shaken, Marcus drove home in silence, refusing to dwell on the inexplicable. But things didn't go back to normal. Not really. Days later, he found the first clue that something was wrong. The seatbelt on the passenger side was still buckled tight, as if someone was still sitting there. The faint scent of wet earth lingered in the car, no matter how many times he cleaned it. And then there were the dreams. Night after night, he saw her standing by the roadside, her eyes locked onto his, lips moving in silent warning he could never quite hear. The worst part came a week later. He was walking through a parking garage late at night when he caught his reflection in a car window. But something was off. There, in the dim surface of the glass, was the outline of someone sitting in his passenger seat, still waiting. He brought something with him, and it never left.